My name is Liza, and I'm a 24-year-old woman living in Austin, Texas. Life hasn't exactly turned out the way I imagined, but it's taught me some hard lessons about family, love, and the value of standing up for yourself. I married my husband, Kody, 3 years ago. Back then, I believed he was my partner in everything, a man who loved me for who I was and would always have my back. But from the moment I stepped into his family home, things changed. My mother-in-law, Karen, made it her mission to remind me I didn't belong. She would smile and pretend to adore me when Kody was around. But the moment we were alone, her mask would drop. Karen hated me, and she made no effort to hide it. The problem wasn't just that I married her son. It was that I earned more than him. I worked as a marketing analyst for a tech company, and my paycheck often covered more of our expenses than Kody's did. Karen couldn't stand that. In her eyes, it was my job to cater to my husband and his family, no matter what I brought to the table. She started treating me like a live-in maid. "You're home early. Why don't you clean the kitchen?" She'd say, or, "Kody works so hard. Shouldn't you handle the laundry?" It wasn't about chores. It was about control. I cooked dinner for everyone after a long day at work, only for Karen to criticize it. I'd scrub the floors, and she'd find something I missed. Kody would tell me to ignore her, but he never stood up for me. The worst part was the double-faced act. Around Kody, Karen would sing my praises. "Liza's so hardworking," she'd gush. "You're lucky to have her." But when he wasn't there, she'd call me names, roll her eyes at me, or even guilt me into running errands for her. Despite all this, I kept telling myself to push through. This is marriage, I thought. It'll get better. But the truth was, I was bending over backward for a family that didn't appreciate me, and every day, it wore me down a little more. It all came to a head on my 25th birthday, a day I had hoped would be filled with joy and love. I'd worked so hard to make that house feel like a home, to be a good wife, and to endure Karen's constant jabs. Deep down, I wanted that day to remind me why I'd chosen this life. To celebrate with my husband and maybe, just maybe, feel like I belonged. I decided to keep the celebration small, just the three of us. Kody, Karen, and me. I planned everything from the decorations to the cake, and even set up Karen's favorite chair at the table. I wanted to prove to her that I wasn't trying to replace her in Kody's life, that we could all coexist peacefully. The evening started off smoothly. Karen even complimented my outfit, which was rare. I thought maybe, for once, we'd have a nice moment as a family. When it came time to cut the cake, I hesitated for a second. Karen was sitting right there, scrolling on her phone, and Kody was distracted with a work email. I didn't want to seem selfish, so I asked, "Should we wait for you to finish, Karen?" She waved me off. "Go ahead, Liza. Don't wait on me," she said without looking up. So I picked up the knife, smiled at Kody, and made the first slice. The next few seconds are a blur in my memory. One moment, I was cutting the cake. The next, Karen was on her feet shouting, "How dare you cut the cake without asking me?" She screamed, her voice sharp enough to make Kody jump. I was stunned. She just told me to go ahead. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say a word, she slapped me across the face. The sting of her hand on my cheek wasn't just physical, it was humiliating. And as if that wasn't enough, she grabbed a handful of the cake I'd spent hours decorating and threw it at me. The room fell silent. I stood there, my cheek burning, frosting sliding down my face, completely shocked. I turned to Kody, my husband, the man who was supposed to love and protect me. "Kody," I said, my voice trembling, "are you seriously going to let her do this to me?" I hoped, prayed, that he'd stand up for me, that he'd tell Karen she was out of line. But instead, he sighed, ran his hand through his hair, and said, "Liza, why do you always have to start drama?" It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Drama?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't raise your voice at me," he snapped. "You know how sensitive my mom is. You could have waited for her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Karen was standing there, glaring at me with smug satisfaction, and Kody, the one person I thought I could count on, was taking her side. I didn't argue. What was the point? My birthday, the one day that was supposed to be about me, had turned into another stage for Karen to humiliate me. And Kody, as always, let her. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my head. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even be angry. All I felt was a deep, hollow sadness. By the time the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about the cake or the slap. It was about the years of disrespect, the endless sacrifices, and the realization that neither Karen nor Kody would ever change. The next morning, I packed my things. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or demand explanations. I just left. I didn't even leave a note. For the first time in years, I chose myself. Leaving wasn't easy. For weeks after I walked out, I kept waiting for Kody to come after me, to call and apologize, to tell me he'd made a mistake. But all I got was silence. The first few days were the hardest. I rented a small apartment downtown and started piecing my life back together. The emptiness in that space mirrored the void I felt inside. But as the days turned into weeks, something strange happened. I started to feel lighter. Without Karen's constant criticism and Kody's indifference weighing me down, I could finally breathe. I threw myself into my work, took up yoga, and even joined a local book club. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for someone else. 3 years passed, and I became someone I barely recognized, stronger, happier, and more confident. My career soared. I made friends who felt more like family than Karen or Kody ever did. I stopped thinking about them altogether. That is, until one evening when my phone rang. The name on the screen stopped me in my tracks. Kody. I hesitated before answering, a flood of emotions rushing in. What could he possibly want after all this time? Liza. His voice cracked as soon as I picked up. I need you. It wasn't the confident, dismissive tone I remembered. He sounded desperate, almost broken. Mom's gone, he continued, barely able to get the words out. She passed away last week. I don't know what to do. The house is falling apart. I'm falling apart. I've lost everything, Liza. I need you. Please come back. I was stunned. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. His words swirled in my mind. I need you. The same man who stood by as his mother humiliated me, who dismissed my pain, now wanted me to swoop in and save him. Liza, he pleaded when I didn't respond. I've changed. I realize now how much I hurt you, how wrong I was to let Mom treat you that way. I miss you, baby. Please, come home. We can start over. We can build a new life together. I took a deep breath, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. But then, I remembered. I remembered Karen's slap, the frosting sliding down my face, Kody's cold indifference, and the years I spent breaking my back for a family that never respected me. No, I said firmly, my voice steady. What? He stammered, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. No, Kody, I repeated. I'm not coming back. I'm not your savior. I'm not your maid. And I'm definitely not the woman who's going to fix your life because you let it fall apart. Liza, please. Do you remember the day you humiliated me on my birthday? When you sided with your mother instead of defending me, you made your choice, Kody. And now I'm making mine. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, could feel the weight of his silence. I spent 3 years rebuilding my life, I continued. 3 years learning to love myself after everything you and your mother put me through. And I'm not going to throw all that away just because you suddenly realize what you lost. But I've changed, he whispered. Maybe you have, I said. But it doesn't matter. I don't need you anymore, Kody. I've moved on, and you should too. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. This wasn't about revenge or holding a grudge. It was about choosing myself, something I should have done a long time ago. When I hung up the phone, I didn't feel regret or sadness. I felt relief. Kody's problems weren't mine anymore, and I was finally free to live the life I deserved. After that phone call, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't known before. It wasn't just about turning Kody down. It was about fully stepping into the life I had built for myself. For years, I had defined my worth by what I could do for others, by how much I could endure. But now, I saw my strength in a different light, not as someone who tolerated pain, but as someone who chose happiness. The life I had rebuilt was beautiful in ways I never expected. My small apartment had grown into a cozy sanctuary filled with things that brought me joy. My job, once a means to escape the chaos at home, had blossomed into a career I loved. I'd started traveling, something I'd always dreamed of but never had the freedom to do. More importantly, I'd surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me. My book club turned into a circle of close friends who celebrated my wins and held me up when I faltered. They were there for the little moments too, movie nights, weekend brunches, and even an impromptu road trip to the Grand Canyon. On my 28th birthday, 3 years after the disaster that drove me to leave, I threw a party for myself. Not out of obligation, not to please anyone else, but simply because I wanted to celebrate me. My friends decorated my home with fairy lights and flowers, and we danced in the living room to my favorite songs. When it was time to cut the cake, everyone cheered, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing but joy. Standing there, knife in hand, I thought back to that moment 3 years ago when Karen slapped me and Kody stood by. It wasn't sadness I felt, it was gratitude. Because if that night hadn't happened, I might never have found the courage to walk away. My life now wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I learned to trust myself, to set boundaries, and to let go of people who didn't deserve a place in my heart. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to save me. As I looked around the room, at the friends who had become my family, at the life I had built from the ground up, I realized something. I didn't need Kody. I didn't need Karen. I didn't need anyone to complete me because I was already whole. And that was the greatest gift of all.